everything can be going great and fine, and then suddenly it's not. I had preeclampsia. Okay, I just want to start this out by saying that I am not a healthcare professional in any way, shape, or form, but this is to talk about my personal experience with preeclampsia, and this is just from my perspective. So do with that what you will. I know when I had preeclampsia, I was Googling a bunch of stuff, I was YouTubing stuff, and I couldn't find a lot. I think I found one video of this girl talking about her experience with preeclampsia, so I just thought that why not share my experience and see if I could potentially be a resource for any of you out there who might have it. So I'm currently pregnant with my second child, and in the middle of my second trimester, about a month left or so, I started getting out of breath recently and just not being able to walk as well without aches and pains and all that boring stuff. But the thing is, when I was pregnant with Ada, I don't know what a normal third trimester looks like, I guess. And all of my symptoms that I had with her in my third trimester are, they just kind of resurfaced pretty much right away with my second pregnancy, which I know is common. A lot of things happen sooner the next time. The aches and pains and all that, I was not expecting, because that all came on at like 6 weeks or something like that. And then I basically just picked up right where I left off in my third trimester with her. So much of this has been a little bit scary the second time around, just because getting out of breath, rapid weight gain in your second trimester kind of hit me this time, and my blood pressure is still low. Everything's mostly looking fine. So get that out of the way. But it reminded me when I was pregnant with my first and I had preeclampsia, and all of those feelings and the doom and everything kind of set back in, and I remembered what it was like. And I was thinking to myself, well, when I had it the first time, I was looking a bunch of stuff up and I couldn't find a bunch of information about it. Well, I mean, you can find information and you can ask your doctors and your healthcare providers and all that, but sometimes it's just easier to hear things from your peers or people who are experiencing it as well, or who have experienced it, because it's sometimes that's what you need. You need to feel like you're talking to a human and not somebody who just deals with this all the time. And you know what I mean? Like, a real human experience is a little bit wanted sometimes. So when I was looking this up when I was diagnosed, I found like one video and that's it. So I thought I would share my humble experience as well. So with Ada, I was going with a birth center and I was going to have a home birth. That was my plan, and I was very well aware that of course anything can happen. It may not go how you want it to. If there's one thing that everybody knows about childbirth, is that it's painful. So I was looking up a bunch of natural remedies and methods, and I don't like hospitals. I don't. It's not my favorite place to be. It's a sterile, weird environment that's never gonna feel super homey and nice. And when you're going through a huge experience like giving birth, it doesn't feel nice to be in a sterile environment like that, and on a narrow little bed where you have to try to have the biggest workout of your life. So that was not ideal for me, needless to say. Anyway, that wasn't what I wanted. Up until, I think it was like 3 weeks before I had her was when I was diagnosed. Up until then, everything was going smoothly and great, but the only issue was that I wasn't moving around a lot. At least this is my take on it, and my midwife as well. I'm pretty sure I'll have to confirm that with her, but from talking to her and stuff, that is probably what happened. So I didn't have a car that was working at the time, so I kind of stopped working. I was doing DoorDash and Instacart, all that. And then when my car stopped working, my husband needed his car for his day job, and so I wasn't getting out a lot. And we didn't have means to get another car, and he was working so much that he couldn't fix my car, and we didn't have means to fix my car by taking it to a mechanic, so there's all that. But basically, I was kind of home all day. And if you know anything about being pregnant, or if you've ever been pregnant, then you know how tiring it is. Just the freaking fatigue that gets you until you enter the second trimester, and that usually goes away a little bit, at least it did for me. But when you're home all day by yourself and you don't have a car, you don't really have any way of leaving unless you go for a walk or something like that, and it is so uninspiring to go for a walk when you're that fatigued that you just kind of don't, and you just lay around and feel miserable and tired and somewhat sore and sick and everything of pregnancy. So I embraced that, and I didn't get up and move around that much. I used to just lay in bed and lounge around on the couch, go outside, sit in the sun. And that was really the bulk of my life while I was pregnant with her. So I was very sedentary, which isn't good. And on top of that, I wasn't eating a lot. And when I did eat, it was stuff like not good for you carbs. And it sucks because I love cooking and I couldn't really cook because everything disgusted me. Like just everything. The thought of most foods disgusted me, especially meat, which is probably the easiest way to get protein, enough protein. And so I just wasn't eating any protein pretty much and not exercising. And that does not make a good combination when you're pregnant. I mean, in general, it's pretty unhealthy, but obviously during pregnancy, it's like 10 times worse. So this time around, I am able to be a lot more active. I'm able to go for walks. I'm able to do more than just sitting around. You really can't control your circumstances when you're pregnant, and that is one thing that preeclampsia really taught me in life. Everything can be going great and fine, and then suddenly it's not. And birth is a huge life experience. So if you are planning on having a home birth, you got diagnosed with preeclampsia, now it's looking like that may not be an option. If it doesn't happen and you're upset about that, and everyone says, well, you can't control anything, well, you never can control it, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you can't, and that sucks, but just so you know, it's okay if you're feeling that way. Like, it's okay to be upset about that. It is a huge life experience and it can be traumatizing. I watched a lot of videos and, you know, like unexpected births and whatever, because I wanted to be as educated as possible, because for me personally, I feel like I can get through workouts and things better if I understand what's going on and what's happening in my body and what my muscles are doing and what I'm supposed to focus on and how to get through it and all of that. So I was researching a lot, and it did help me out a lot. But obviously you can't control anything. That is true. But the more prepared you are, probably the better experience you're gonna have, because you can't control everything, but in the areas where you're prepared and you know what to do, then it is going to be very helpful for what you can control. So there you go, control what you can. But I'm from a unique perspective where my mom had 13 children. I'm the second oldest. I'm like, well, if she can do it, I can. And then, you know, I have sisters and friends and family who have given birth, and I have resources available to me. So that's awesome. And it does help. And it helped me feel like, okay, everything's gonna be fine. I just can't be afraid. But I also had this thing going in the back of my mind. For some reason, I had this thing going with God the whole time where I was like, I was praying against pain and all this different stuff. Okay, God, well, I'll be fine. People give birth all the time, but as long as I don't get preeclampsia, I kid you not. From the beginning of my pregnancy, that is pretty much what I was saying. Well, I'll be fine as long as I don't get preeclampsia, because that's the only thing that could really happen at this point, really, right? No, there are many different things like that, or to that caliber, that can happen. But I don't know why I had that in my head, but I did. And let me tell you, man, your thoughts are powerful. And I'm not saying that's my fault. I know that what I learned from this experience is that you can't control what happens to you, and you have to give up control over everything. You can control what you can and be prepared where you can be prepared, but you have to give up control over your life, essentially, because you don't know what's gonna happen. So I got diagnosed with preeclampsia, I think it was the middle of August, and I was due September 4th. And then the middle of August happened, and I got a car back a couple weeks prior, and I was determined to make enough money, door dashing and all that, so that Isaac could be home for a couple weeks with me after I had the baby. And I don't necessarily regret that, but what I think happened was I was sedentary that whole time, and then I went out and was door dashing for hours on end, trying to make a few grand so that he could stay home and be guilt-free, because I knew that if he had to come up with the money to save and set aside for that, it wasn't gonna feel the same to him, and it wasn't gonna feel like he could actually take a break, because that could be going to other things. But if I made the money, then it could be, well, we just have the money and we can relax for a few weeks and take time off. So don't know what I'm gonna do about that this time around, but during that time it worked and I made the money and all that, and that was great. But then after I was done making the money after a couple weeks, and I was gonna keep going, I was gonna keep making more money, but then I had this really long day. One day it was really hot and I got really exhausted and just had to go home and lay down. And by the end of the night, my feet were so swollen, and if I have a picture, I'll insert it. But what you have to know about me is that my feet are bony and narrow, and they are not big. So if they were swollen at all, I could tell. And they had been swollen a couple times when I'd walk around and stuff. I dealt with that for sure, but not to this caliber. I would press them and there would be an indentation in them. And I was like, okay, let's see if this goes away. You know, I elevated them, I laid down, I sat up, I did whatever and tried to let it go away. And by like the next morning, I think I texted my midwife because, you know, I was asking my mom and my sisters and all that, like, what should I do? Because is this normal? Did this happen to you? Whatever. They're like, you should just text your midwife and see if everything's fine. So I texted her, and then I ended up getting a house visit from one of the midwives at the birth center. And she wanted to test my blood pressure. And I was like, no, I know where you're going with this. I know what you think is happening, but that's not the problem. I was just on my feet a lot. People get swollen, whatever. And I was in major denial. Sure enough, she tested my blood pressure and took my weight, which was about 15 pounds, 20 pounds maybe heavier than it was my previous visit a week or two before that. So that's rapid. And my blood pressure was high. She had me lay on my left side and it lowered, but it was still kind of high. So she recommended I get co-care with the hospital just in case something happens and I need to be delivering in a hospital. In this case, I would already be on board with them. I wouldn't just get some random person in there. I'd have a team assigned to me already, or however it works. I don't know. So I did that, and I had to go a couple times a week. It was twice a week I had to go and do, I don't remember what it was called, but some in-depth scan thing where they would hook me up for a while and then they'd take me down and I'd get an ultrasound to make sure everything's fine with the baby, make sure everything's fine with me. They would get the baby's heartbeat, they get my blood pressure, monitor all that for like 30 minutes to an hour. I don't remember how long it was, and then I'd have to go get an ultrasound. So that was what I was doing, and it sucked, but they got me on labetalol. I think it's labetalol. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a blood pressure medication. And I was taking that and my blood pressure did even out. And then the doctor and the midwives agreed that were I to maintain fine blood pressure, then it's totally fine to continue with a home birth. I was really stubborn about this. I was like, well, it's gonna be fine. I would like to still have a home birth anyway. But the midwives were not comfortable with that because of obvious reasons. They're not idiots. And apparently I was. I would try to lower my blood pressure. I would try to like go for walks. At that point, I started going for walks every day because that's supposed to lower your blood pressure. And at this point, you know, I've got 3 weeks left of being pregnant. And another thing that was weird about it though was that I didn't know when I was due because my cycle was super inconsistent before I got pregnant, and like we're talking months in between where I went without a cycle. So my original due date was September 4th. And then when I went and got my in-depth anatomy scan of her, she was measuring smaller than her due date. So they pushed it back like 2 weeks, I think. I think they had me at like September 23rd or 24th, something like that, when it had previously been September 4th. So this is why you should track your cycle, because if you're not already balanced and all that beforehand, it makes everything a lot harder. They would have still done the home birth if the medication had controlled my blood pressure continuously, but it eventually stopped controlling it. And one day I went in and, you know, I'd been getting floaters, seeing stars when I would sit up. I want to say too quickly, but I would just kind of sit up at a normal speed and see stars and like feel like I was gonna pass out. So that's really not awesome. Anyway, so it got to the point where my blood pressure was really high, and a couple other contributing factors. They found some proteins in my urine and all that. So they diagnosed me with preeclampsia, and that was just a horrible, daunting moment. I think I was like officially diagnosed for 1 or 2 weeks before September 4th. I think that I could have advocated for being induced at home at that point while my blood pressure was still lower, had I known my due date was for sure September 4th, but I didn't know that. So I went into one of my last appointments at the birth center, and they decided that they were going to try to speed things up either way because it was not looking great. And they swept my membrane and did all that, and then took my blood pressure, and it was really flippin' horrible. So they told me, okay, well, you need to go to the hospital and get a scan. He went bye-bye. Since my blood pressure was so high. So I went to get a scan, and I had asked my midwife beforehand, okay, so do you think that they're going to want to induce me? Because I already did my research, I knew what was going on. And she said, yeah, they probably will. They can schedule it a little bit out, but I mean, I knew. So basically, I just went home and I cried so hard, like you would not believe. And I had to have a real conversation with God. Like I had to face it. I had to face my fear, which apparently was getting preeclampsia the entire time. And it hit me in the face. And I was laying on my bed crying so hard, and that was the way it had to be until Isaac got home. But I waited. I did not, luckily, go to the hospital until Isaac got off work. No, I was advised to go there right away. I kind of knew it was gonna happen. So I just laid there looking at my blood pressure monitor and trying everything I could desperately. I think I took like 5 baths trying to lower my blood pressure. I went for a walk, and then I was just laying there on my left side, and it wasn't working. It was not getting lower. I think the average was like 150 or 160 over 97 or something like that. So it was not great, but I was looking at that and my preeclampsia, just paperwork. And I just cried for hours because that was not what I wanted. I mean, nobody wants that, but I had to have like a real conversation with God. Like, I don't want to die. I really wanted to have a home birth. It's not gonna happen now. And oftentimes God speaks to me through questions. So he just started asking me questions like, okay, well, what it came down to was, if the baby dies, are you gonna be okay? And I asked myself that. Mentally, I don't think so, but ultimately, yes, I'll be okay. Because I have God and I know where I'm going and I will survive. And then I'm like, well, God, what if I die? He's like, well, what if you die? Are you gonna be okay? I'm like, well, Isaac's not gonna be okay. The baby won't be okay. I mean, they will eventually, but that's horrible and I don't wanna picture it. It's like, well, are you gonna be okay though, if you die? And I was like, if I die, I'm going to heaven and everything's gonna be great. So yeah, I guess I'll be okay. It's like, then what are you worried about? And sometimes things just have to be kind of cutthroat like that. Ultimately, there was nothing I could do. And so I said, I don't know what I'm worried about, but I'm scared. And he's like, well, do you trust me? Because I'm the only one who can help you, essentially. Because there's no like cure for preeclampsia except for giving birth. And so they don't know what to do. All they can do is monitor you, keep giving you blood pressure medication, and try to get the baby out of you and monitor you afterwards as well. Because sometimes it doesn't go away for a few weeks or months even. Usually it goes away pretty much right away, but there's nothing that they can do because they don't know what causes it, besides obviously high blood pressure, but there's no way really to avoid it. Sometimes people have normal, healthy lives and they just get preeclampsia. So there's not really anything they can do to stop it if something goes wrong. So I'm like, well, yeah, God, I trust you, because worst case, either way, I'll be okay because I have you. Either I'll be with you and be okay, or I'll have you by my side and be okay. And I know that you're bigger than this because, he created me, he created my life, and he's the author of life and death. Not me, not you, not anybody else. And ultimately, that is the reality that I had to face. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like it was fun, but after that and continuous crying for a while longer, I felt like, okay, I'm ready, I can do this. And if I can't do it, there's nothing I can do. But either way, I'm gonna be okay. And I was, luckily. I didn't have to face any harsh realities after the fact. So I was eternally grateful, and I still am. Huh. Because I got this cute girl. She's really big now. Huh. That's the reality that you do unfortunately have to face, and you have to come to terms with it with yourself. And I would encourage you to pray about it and to have a conversation with God about it, because that is really the only way out. And if you're feeling afraid, well, then you're not trusting God, because they say that the Bible says that perfect love casts out all fear. So I knew that by being afraid of the outcome, I wasn't in the presence of God, in the presence of something else. And I'm not saying that you're bad if you're afraid, but I'm just saying, just have a little check-in about it and figure it out, because there's nothing you can do. You can either put your trust in Jesus or you can put your trust in man, but just he has the best in mind for you. So it really is ideal to just trust him and know that everything's probably going to be okay. There are no guarantees, obviously, but most likely everything is going to be fine. So that was my experience. Can't say it was awesome, but the ending was great. And I know that it usually is onset in the later portions of pregnancy, so you're probably near the end either way. Just know that you're going to feel so much better after giving birth. At least I did. Someone told me that and I was like, yeah, well, everyone has different experiences. But they're right. I felt incredible after I gave birth, and not just because I wasn't pregnant anymore. Though that was the main reason. Well, not the main reason, but also having a precious little baby in your arms and out of you is just surreal. The best thing in the world. So you'll feel better soon. I trust. Okay. Say bye.
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 Congratulations.
Congratulations. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
See you next time.
Goodbye.